Chinatown, a unique and traditional place. Chinese people who traveled across the ocean first opened Chinese restaurants in Chinatown, and slowly took root and survived. They constituted the early Chinese immigrants to Britain. In recent years, more and more Chinese have come to the UK to study, live and work, and they have brought more cultural collections and brands. It is estimated that nearly 150,000 Chinese students come to the UK every year, and this number keeps rising. Someone said, "You can take a boy out of China, but you can't take China out of the boy." So, what are the cultural differences between China and the West? Is it just the food, or is it a completely different way of life? I'm on a mission to find out. Scott and Yuqi, an international married couple, shared their views on cultural differences.
I have spent 9 years living in Shanghai, and I came back to Cardiff with my wife about 3 years ago, just before the pandemic.
When it comes to food, Chinese cuisine seems to be more receptive to ingredients.
In China, they'll eat everything of the pig except the sound that they make. I had, for example, duck's tongue, probably every organ in the animal, whereas in Britain now people often only eat just the meat, like the muscle.
The Chinese always think that the greatest respect for food is to make the best use of it, which is why some unique ingredients can be made into dishes. Influenced by a 1,000-year-old tradition, eating is always linked with reunion, and Chinese people may have different cultural attitude towards food. For example, the Chinese note on this table has a symbolic meaning of reunion.
In the UK, although some people think of food as a very important thing in their life, most people just see it as fuel, something to, right? Something just to feed your body energy, just energy. Okay, what am I going to have for lunch? Oh, that's convenient, I'll eat that. In China, it's more an important part of culture. In terms of like drinking, when I'm with my friends, it's very similar. You know, it's cheers, toast, you've got a drink, you've got a drink. But with family, it's different. In China, with family, it's drinking. But here, with friends, it's drinking. So it's a similar culture, but with a different group.
When it comes to family ties, Chinese people seem to be more connected to the original family.
I think in China, we treat children as a very important part of a family, even if they're married. They're not leaving the family, they're just expanding the family. So we stick together. This is the closeness in Chinese culture. The family concept in Chinese culture is very important for thousands of years.
Yuqi believes that the biggest differences in children's education is the definition of success.
Even if you didn't go to university, you're not treated as a failure. But in China, it's the mainstream culture is, you follow this pathway, and if you didn't, then you're a failure, and you ruin the reputation of your family. Especially for our generation, we're the single child generation, so you carry a lot of reputation for your family.
At the Grand Theatre Hotel, the largest Chinese cultural festival in Wales was held. Although there are huge differences between China and the West, it attracts more cultural exchanges between each other, and it's also how Chinese people to be recognized by the world. And I will often wonder whether the overseas Chinese in the UK still retain these cultural identities. Finally, I found an answer. As one of the most traditional Chinese folk performers, I was surprised to see it in the UK, and the locals also participated. the lion wakes up, it will pick up old oranges on the ground and bring it to the audience as a symbol of blessing for good health. In the end, only lettuce was left on the ground. The lion swallowed it, tore it into pieces, and sprinkled it to the audience as a blessing of prosperity, because the Chinese pronunciation of lettuce is Shen Cai, which means to bring you wealth. On the Chinese Cultural Heritage Day, different types of traditional cultural memories are preserved. Here we can see someone practicing the Chinese note, and this is the traditional medicine they prepared.
Truffles and fingers and also for headache and also for refreshing.
People from other countries can also learn about Chinese culture and promote cultural exchanges between each other. Chinese paper cutting is a folk art of carving patterns on paper with scissors, which has now been included in the country's intangible cultural heritage. These cultural symbols, shared by all Chinese people, are passed on from generation to generation. Yuqi said, "The Chinese calligraphy is a unique cultural treasure, and she is honored to teach the history and delighted that people can feel the beauty of Chinese
They're all
culture."
something to do with nature. Say thank you, thanks on its own. Like thanks.
谢谢.
And sorry is
对不起. 对不起.
3 fingers to pinch the pen. Okay? So the big thumb at the front, 2 fingers at the back. Dip the brush in water, okay, wet the brush, and then this is basically like a paper form of slate. So you start from here, and then also your elbow should be laying on the desk to support your arm. Okay, so this is the first stroke. See, this is water, so you're playing with water. Okay. And then third stroke, yeah, you go up, down, up. And this is the tail of a dragon, yeah, go up, and then this is the sun, okay, chasing the sun. There we go, dragon.
Land, drag, and then slowly lift it off. That's a bit better, isn't it?
And as one of the largest ethnic groups in Swansea, our Chinese community plays a major role in Swansea and life in Wales. Its influence surrounds us through its significant social, educational, economic and cultural contributions to our vibrant city. So I am delighted that the Chinese Society in Wales is staging this Chinese cultural heritage today, to bring us together for a wonderful event to help celebrate Her Majesty's Platinum Jubilee, and one which reflects the proud traditions and diversity of Chinese culture and our multicultural society and city.
After the opening speech, the real performance begins. Chinese actors stand on the stage and sway their charm as much as possible to show their culture and stories.
梁山伯与祝英台他们的之间的这个故事，尽可能的给大家表现出来。从一开始的相知，愉快的在一起求学，然后到后面不得已的分别，最后化蝶的整一个故事线，我们希望能够传递给大家。 当时我就说，那我们为什么不换个思路，可以用西洋的乐器，然后演奏中国的传统乐曲？这其实是一个思路，因为西洋乐器它更加贴合西方人他的一个传统的一个认知，而且他们是比较熟悉的。那从他们熟悉的点去切入，那更好的能够让他们感受到中国传统乐曲的魅力。当你去拉一首中国曲子的时候，你身上是会有一定的使命感，你会感觉到，我这个首曲子在我现在的时候，我就是来在代表着我们中国的这个文化确实是会有一种文化认同感，而且呢，也希望透过自己尽自己所能，把这个文化的认同感传递给在场的观众。我觉得这是很重要的一点。
If the violin performance is a musical enjoyment, then the Chinese Tai Chi focuses more on finding the inner peace.
Jing is a traditional way of Tai Chi. It's presenting very important concept of Chinese well-being to the local community in Swansea. I think they'll understand what Qigong and Tai Chi actually is, because a lot of people I spoke to in the West, they don't actually know what that is. What is Tai Chi? And then I can only explain, okay, it's just the Chinese version of yoga.
It's great to get so many people together in the same place and celebrate Chinese culture. I felt very proud to take part in it.
This performance on the Chinese Cultural Heritage Festival brought me back to China and made me want to know more about the stories of overseas Chinese. In the Cathay Cemetery, the third largest cemetery in the UK, a tombstone commemorating all Chinese stood in front of me, as if time had brought me into the long river of history. This monument was jointly established by the Chinese living in the UK. People put the original stones from their hometown to express their nostalgia for the motherland. To some extent, Chinese and Western cultures have very different attitudes towards life and death.
It's a huge taboo in Chinese to talk about death. I think British people are quite comfortable to joke about death. I'm not sure why. We've got quite dark humour in the UK.
Due to the impact of Confucianism, Chinese people believe that there is an afterlife after death, so there are many rituals and superstitions at funerals.
I felt that Chinese funerals were a bit more impersonal, very respectful, but maybe British funerals are very personal. You feel it's about the story of the person's life, and you try and capture what they cared about and what they brought to the world, whereas Chinese funeral is much more
Like a ritual.
like a ritual, yeah. And you go through the steps to show respect.
Two cypress trees stand on both sides of the garden like soldiers. They were planted when the monument was built, because Chinese people believe that cypress trees can bless those who have passed away with long life in heaven. Now the Chinese immigrating to the UK have gone through several generations. I've been wondering what obstacles they will meet when they integrating into the local society.
I find it really hard to get used to the food here and the social here. I think one of the biggest difference that we have encountered is the living styles is very different. It's a bit hard to say. I find that the relationship between people and the ways they communicate each other, the relationship between neighbors, between your colleagues and co-workers are very different from our hometown.
Having studied and worked in the UK for more than 10 years, Mengxing still retains a very obvious Chinese cultural imprint and considers herself a Chinese.
I would say I am Chinese, even though I've been lived in UK for a long time. We're UK citizens now, but we're still Chinese indeed. Because I spent the first 20 years of my life living in China and the past 10 years here in UK. So I was grown up in Shanghai, grown up with our family within a totally Chinese environment.
As a new generation of Chinese immigrants, Mengxing believes that, unlike the early ones, their generation will bring more cultural exchanges between China and the West.
The early immigration, they came to UK mainly for a living, to do the labor work. So they are more kept in the same cohort and live apart from the society. So there's very little cultural exchange between that kind of Chinese immigrants and local UK locals. But in recent years, more and more people came to UK to study a degree. They've been working in a high-end or high technology industry, so they bring more diversity to the highest standard of the contribution between the relationship between UK and China, because it's more like a high-end exchange. It's not just an exchange of labor, it's an exchange of knowledge, experience, and skills.
While talking about identities, Mengxing believes that multiple identities can bring a richer life experience.
For us, because we are immigrants, so we have this cultural identity from the heritage culture originally where we come from, but we also have the identities that we've been stuck to live in a totally different country and influenced by the culture. And when I grow up and I get to study here, I can keep my original Chinese cultural volume and absorb some new ideas from the Western world. For example, we are more open-minded and we are very open to our parents and the kids' relationship, and we are very open to accept new stuff. And also my husband and I, we are Christian, we have a Christian family background. Christianity does not really cope with our traditional cultural volume, but in our family we cope with them very well. It's just different identity we have, but it doesn't really come across each other or does not really conflict with each other.
你的名字叫什么
I don't know. You
没有
you read it. That's not my cat.
It's not my kitten, its ears are too soft.
Soft.
It's not my kitten, its tongue is too fuzzy.
They grown up in a Chinese
it's my kitten.
family,
It's
so
Tammy's
Chinese or Chinese culture is their heritage culture. That's something they won't be able to deny and they won't be able to discard.
Mengxing thinks that her children are too young to decide who they are, but as parents, they are quite open for them to choose who they want to be.
Once they grown up, they have to face a problem that they are British-born Chinese. Or even though they get British nationality, they're still Chinese indeed. So we are, as we discussed, we are very open to this question. We let them to decide which identities they would like to have, or which part or percentage of identities they think they are. If they think they're British or if they think they're Welsh, it's totally okay. But they do carry a part of Chinese identity on them, not really on their appearance, but also on the way they've grown up, the lifestyles, and that's something they carried from their parents. So that's a heritage culture, or say heritage identity.
The Chinese Pantamount Cemetery was built in 1999. The approximate meaning of the couplet written in Chinese at the arch is On Qingming Festival, the Chinese tomb sweeping day, Even though it's thousands miles apart, people still keep the old custom and come to the cemetery to send flowers to express their nostalgia for the motherland and their loved ones. Something changed, but something's not. Only the memories and the Chinese cultural identities are preserved.